Okay, thank you, Esther, for the welcoming. I hope you can all understand me well and see the slides. Well, so let's start on my talk on the Arctic fox gardens. As Esther already said, this talks about the Arctic fox and the role of facilitating den sites. And the broader picture is a little bit about the implications on nutrient flows, which are drawn by this. So I'm going to quickly introduce myself, then we'll go through the methods, hypotheses, and results of my thesis. And at the end, we'll conclude a little bit on how all this comes together in the broader picture. So who am I? My name is Dominik. I currently live in Freiburg. This is in South Germany. I have now finished my master's with this project I did in Iceland there. Currently, I work as a research assistant at the Uni of Freiburg as well. So starting off, in the scientific cosmos, there's a magnitude of concepts to describe the world. There are a lot of theories, a lot of research stuff where you can try to adapt to the natural world. One of these concepts is the spatial research subsidization concept, which more or less says that some animals subsidize or fertilize or somehow help other patches of land by bringing nutrients or energy there. I won't go too deep into this, but just to get you a little started why this is important, I will take you on a little journey to the Pleistocene epoch. During this time of the world, there are a lot of very large mammals called the megafauna. You can see some examples of them there. And as you can expect, they can walk quite large distances and they consume quite a lot. And what follows out of this is what you see on the map on the left there. That is that they transport a lot of nutrients from one place to another. But, well, more or less unfortunately or fortunately, all these animals are not alive anymore. So that's what you can see on the map on the right. So their capacity to transport nutrients from one place to another is left to only 4 to 5% of lateral nutrient transfer by animals. So you can see the contribution animals can have on lateral nutrient flows is quite excessive. So it's not only wind or water which can transport energy, it's as well animals. So the question is, what has all this to do with foxes? Here you can see a picture of a fox den. This is in the Canadian Arctic, but it's not that important. What you see is in the middle a more or less green area, and this is the fox den, and all the rest of the picture is gray. And what the fox does here is that it relocates nutrients to this den, and by that it fertilizes it, or the area above the den, it fertilizes this area, and there is a more or less lush vegetation. So this is for the high Arctic, for Alaska, and I wanted to test this hypothesis in Iceland. So the question was whether Arctic fox transfer add that much nutrients to their dens in Iceland as well, that the soil nutrients are altered a lot, and by that the vegetation is changed as well. How did I did this? Of course, we have proper methods. I took some. As you already heard in the introduction, I carried out this research in Melrakkaslétta. because this talk is for the Icelandic Institute of Natural History. You will see the map of Iceland already a bit later, so that for now. However, I had two pillars, the soil and the vegetation. For the soil thing, I collected 5 soil samples on each den. And as well, I analyzed these soil samples in the lab with so-called quick test stripes. I made a water solution and then tested the solution with the quick test stripes. The vegetation was sampled 10 times on each den within a little metal frame. You will see next. I recorded all species and their abundance on a thing called the brown blanket scale. That's just describing how much of this certain plant species is there. Of course, with that, there comes statistics into play. Some of you will maybe now know what this is here. It's R, it's a statistical programming language, and I will not go too deep into this because it's maybe bores off a lot of people. Just that you heard it, I used some multivariate methods, which just more or less models each species and how this plant species responds to other plant species and their abundance. So going on to the results. Here you can see the picture of a fox den at Melrakkasletta. At the back there is a little hideout for a hunter, but that's not the topic today. More or less in the foreground you can see it's lush green. There's some flowering plants, yellow, and as well some purple. And in the back it's more or less grayish, brownish tundra vegetation, dwarf shrubs. So on this side the hypothesis was right. The ongoing traffic of fox and their remainings subsidized the soils that much that there were different plants growing than in the surroundings. So going on to this little bit, it's complicated to read and not that important that you understand it thoroughly. However, you can see on the upper left that there are a lot of species laying either on the right or on the left of this dashed little line in the middle of this dashed vertical line in the vertical line in the middle. And this vertical line in the middle distinguishes the den from the control sites. The dens have completely different plant species on them than the control sites, as shown on this graph a little bit. On the right side, you can see the co-occurrence of plant species on dens or not on dens. The picture is more or less the same. There are a lot of plant species on the lower right. They all occur on dens, and those on control sites are on the upper left. I did as well an analysis of functional groups, and as shown here, perennial herbs and grasses are more abundant on dens. Lichen, moss, or dwarf shrubs are more abundant on control sites, showing that the foxes are increasing the growth conditions for perennial herbs and grasses. As well, the indicator species is an analysis you can do as well. The Ranunculus acris, the common buttercup, the alpine lady's mantle, and the slender bedstraw are indicators for dens, shown here on the left. And crowberry, dwarf birch, and bog bilberry is an indicator for control sites. You can already see here that on the left, on the den side, there are more flowering plants, and on the right side, there's more this dwarf, shrub, tundra species shown. Soil analysis showed a similar picture. I tested the nitrate concentrations on den and on control sites. Den sites showed an altered nitrate concentration. The same was the thing for phosphate concentrations. However, as you can see in these on this little grayish bars, the confidence intervals are a little bit large, and this has to be taken with a little bit of cautiousness because the phosphate retention capacity of the Icelandic soils is very high, so this is a bit tricky here. To sum up the results, Arctic fox accumulate nutrients on den sites as shown in either vegetation or the soil. And this nutrients relocations has measured effects shown here on the vegetation. This has multiple effects. Firstly, nutrient availability, the plant growth conditions, which could be shown in larger plants or in a specific bigger leaf area. The dens showed a higher species diversity, and of course by this a bigger other species community. You can see here a picture of a study which was as well from Canada, and here are some wolves at a fox den. And this study showed that the fox dens actually attract other wildlife during their higher structural diversity than the surroundings. So the denning has not only effects on the vegetation or on the soil, it as well has effects on other wildlife, such as here are shown some wolves, but raven were amongst species detected on dens as well, and all these species were with a higher likelihood detected on dens because it seems to somehow attract them. There's a more or less shelter from be seen or whatever they like there. So now coming back to this spatial subsidy framework, as shown, the foxes definitely here serve as animal vectors, which transport nutrients from one ecosystem or one place to a recipient ecosystem to another place. And this is definitely the case here. So this system can be applied to the Arctic fox denning activity. And what you see here, an important thing is the donor ecosystem and the recipient ecosystem boundary. So the question is, where do these nutrients come from? So the answer to this lays in this funny little graph here. In Iceland, there are more or less two ecotypes of Arctic fox. They are distinguished by their proximity to the sea and therefore what they eat. And it's shown here that Arctic fox living close to the sea are mainly, or majority of their food comes from the sea, so it's of marine origin. That can be seabirds, but as well mussels, fish, or carcasses of larger sea animals. Yeah, so as you can see here, now finally a map. The locations of the dens I sampled were all in very close proximity to the sea. More specifically within a 3-kilometer range of the coast. So I have hypothesized that the resources my foxes feed on are of marine origin, at least a majority of them. So with that, the foxes serve as vectors which transport actually the nutrients from a aquatic ecosystem or from an aquatic ecosystem to a terrestrial ecosystem. And that I think is very interesting, because normally you would have a energy flow like shown here. And most of times the energy or the nutrients somehow are flushed down the slope, so to the sea. So as you see, that's quite an well, extraordinary thing that you have some animal, or that you have some nutrients going more or less uphill. So going back to why this is important, and maybe a little bit to the Pleistocene megafauna. As shown here, there currently is a large species extinction, and as you can see in mammals, the species extinction is amongst the largest shown here. And this has, of course, major consequences for ecosystems, and of course for nutrient transport capacity as well. And that is, in my opinion, more or less a very severe reason to further study the nutrient relocation by mammals or by larger animals, which is not that much done, I think. Going on to future research, I think it would be definitely interesting to broaden the study up a little bit to more sites within Iceland, of course, or to the Arctic as well. The analysis of the soil samples could be done via proper wet chemistry. I had to take a little bit of a shortcut there, but that's how it works sometimes. It would be definitely interesting to include other soil nutrients like ammonia, which is very important in Arctic ecosystems as well for plant growth. There could be a biomass assessment actually quantifying how much more plant growth there is on dense, and of course structural measurements for vertical structure on dense compared to the vertical structure on control sites would be interesting as well. To sum this up, the Arctic fox definitely substantially altered soil and vegetation characteristics on dense. These nutrients can be of marine origin and definitely are within my study sites. And while we face global mass extinction, the research on animal vectors subsidizing is crucial. All right, so thank you. I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Dominik. Takk fyrir. Það ykkur velkomin að senda inn spurningar. Það hérna gluggi hægra megin á skjánum hjá okkur sem að fylgjast með á Teams, og endilega skrifið inn spurningar þar sem þið hafið til Dominiks. Thank you very much, Dominik. I have one question myself. You were mentioning some future studies and maybe some extension. Would you think that the location of your study area is important? What if you would compare to these studies and somewhere else? What other location would you choose, and why?
Well, I would say the study area is definitely important, so it's a great question. As the fox are, of course, not hugely large animals, they don't transport like tons of nutrients each year. So if the soil already is more or less fertile, so to speak, I would expect the effect being not that large. So having areas included which are not that scarce in soil nutrition would be definitely interesting. Yep.
Thank you. We have there's one comment here from RIF Research Station, which is located in Melrakkarslétta. Thank you, Dominik, for your talk. If you come to Melrakkarslétta, count on RIF Field Station to help you in your future research. And there is another question here, which is, thanks for interesting presentation. It's from Jón Gunnar Ottoson. Any idea how old these fox dens are? Are they of different age?
Yes, they are definitely of different age, but of course I don't have the local knowledge here. At this point I want to thank Gumi as well for providing me locations of the dens, but by bare eye it was already possible to distinguish a little bit the age of the den. There were some dens which were very large with more or less 20 entrances, and there were some dens which just had, let's say, 3 to 4 entrances. And which were not that elaborate in vegetation, so to speak. But of course, I can't tell you any numbers there. That yeah, was without the scope.
Thank you. I have one more question here on the list. It's from an anonymous person. Did anything in the vegetation cover and which species you found surprise you or contradict your expectations compared dens and control?
Yes, let me think about this 1 second. Of course, when moving to dens which were not that large and so probably not that old, the effect was not that large. So there were maybe some flowering plants, maybe 1 or 2 ranunculus. So that was a bit, so to speak, indifferent. There were dens where the effect was very large, and there were dens where the effect was not that large. And of course, sometimes it appeared to me that there was a species which I would rather find on a control plot. That's, well, I think it's just usual that you have some differentiation within the soil. But I have to say there were no like rare or very interesting species I found. Yeah, so nothing too fancy. Yeah.
Then I would like to add to that question, and maybe related to the question about the age of the den. Do you think that it matters, probably, of course, how often this den has been in use, or how many times a fox family has been dwelling there with bringing a lot of food in, like carcasses? But what do you think about moisture, precipitation, so the location of Melrakkarslétta and maybe the characteristics in terms of weather? Do you think that is important also?
Well, I think so, yes. I can only vaguely fabulate on this, but I would expect that precipitation is definitely an important factor. Melrakkarslétta is especially dry, and you can see this in the more or less normal or control vegetation there. You have dwarf shrub, heath with, I don't know, 5 to 10 species commonly. And as I visited other areas within Iceland, it occurred to me that there are definitely, when there's more precipitation and probably other factors as well, but precipitation, the main factor, the vegetation is a little bit more lush, more green, and there's a higher species diversity. So that's maybe definitely as well a reason why it would be definitely interesting to compare these results with areas where there's more precipitation or there's some other environmental factors changing.
Yeah, did you, there's a question about, did you see, I mean, you mentioned that probably the majority of the food that the foxes are bringing to these dens would be maybe related to the sea, and there are some seabird colonies in the cliffs close by, I guess. Did you see carcasses or any remains on the fox dens, or was that different? And could that be related to the vegetation? So the more carcasses, the richer vegetation, or did you see any, like by eye, any differences?
Yes, I saw some remainings of food, some carcasses, definitely from the wolffish. There were some, and of course from seabirds, but it's not always that easy to identify them by the remainings only. The thing is, the dens I sampled, some of them were probably active in the year I sampled them, and some of them not. So the variation in whether there are carcasses remaining or fresh carcasses remaining was very large. Yes, so that's I think just the study size is a little bit too small to draw conclusions on this, but there were definitely carcasses of marine origin found. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't see any more questions here. Is there something else that you would like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Esther, for providing me with this interesting research topic and hosting me at the Institute. Yeah.
I hope that there will be a publication for everyone soon. Now, well, thank you then, Dominik, for a very interesting talk and presentation.